My name is Ingrid Vale, and I was 34 the night my mother told my father's boss I'd never amounted to much. She said it in a banquet hall full of people who had spent their whole lives working for a company I happened to own. I had driven 2.5 hours to get there. I wore the good coat. I smiled at the door like a daughter, not an owner. What that one sentence set loose in the next 90 seconds, and what my father did 3 days later, is the reason I am finally telling this story. Stay with me, the room is about to go very quiet. The invitation came through my sister. Paige does not send things. She forwards them with a note attached so you understand the favor she is doing you. This one landed in my work inbox on a Tuesday, between a freight contract and a payroll approval. Dad's retirement dinner the 14th, try to dress appropriately. His bosses will be there, so please don't make it weird. I read it twice. Then I laughed alone in my office with the door shut. His bosses will be there. I run a company called Meridian Group. We are not large the way people picture large, but large enough that I hadn't signed my own paychecks by hand in 9 years. I employ people who employ people who employ people. And somewhere down in that long, quiet chain sat a tool and fastener plant in a town called Harlow, where my father had clocked in for 40 years. Paige didn't know that. My mother didn't know that. My father, who had spent 4 decades inside that building, didn't know it either. I closed the email. I made a decision that felt small and turned out not to be. I was going to go, as myself, with my real name on the place card. For 12 years, my family had introduced me with a single sentence, and they had perfected it the way some families perfect a casserole. She dropped out. She drives a truck or something. She never really found her footing. The phrasing shifted depending on the audience. The verdict stayed the same. At first, I corrected them. I would say gently that I own the truck, and then several trucks, and then a building. Each correction landed like a stone in a pond and sank without a ripple. My mother would smile and change the subject to my sister's anniversary or the new countertops, so I stopped, and I want to be clear about why. I didn't stop because they wore me down. I stopped because I finally understood that I was asking the wrong people to grade my paper. You don't keep handing your homework to a teacher who has already written the F before you turn it in. I let them keep their story. I let it harden into family fact. I came home for the holidays I couldn't skip, ate the ham, complimented the countertops, and drove back to my own life by Sunday night. It was not surrender. It was the cleanest kind of distance there is. To understand that banquet hall, you need to understand the kitchen table where the story actually started. I was 22. I had left the state university 9 credits short, not because I was failing, but because I had found something that paid and made sense to me. I was hauling parts on contract, sleeping in the cab between runs, and I had done the math on buying my own box truck. The numbers worked. I needed a cosigner for $8,000. So I brought it home. I wrote the whole plan out by hand on a yellow legal pad. The routes, the margins, the payback schedule, as neat as I could make it. I laid it in front of my father after dinner. He read it slowly. Then he picked up a pen, wrote 5 words across the bottom, and slid it back. No, get a real job. My mother didn't even look up from the dishes. She set it to the sink, almost bored, like a fact about the weather. She never amounted to much, and she never will. Not a fight, not a slammed door. Just a verdict delivered over a kitchen sink about a person who hadn't finished becoming herself yet. I didn't cry. I took my legal pad back, folded it into quarters, and put it in my wallet. I've carried it for 12 years. Not to stay angry. I'll tell you later what I carry it for because it matters more than you think right now. I got the loan another way, through a credit union and a man named Ed who liked my numbers more than my pedigree. I bought the truck. That's the whole origin. No inheritance. No lucky break that fell out of the sky. 1 truck, then a second, then a third when I hired a driver I trusted. 2 winters I nearly lost everything, once to a blown engine, once to a client who went bankrupt owing me 4 months. Both times I climbed out alone, because I had already learned not to expect a hand from home. I learned freight, then warehousing, then the quiet art of buying small suppliers who were tired and had no one to leave the business to. I would keep their people, keep their name on the door, and fold the back office into mine. That is how Meridian grew. 1 tired little company at a time. 3 years before that retirement dinner, Meridian made the largest acquisition it had ever made. A mid-market portfolio called the Callaway Group, a handful of regional industrial businesses across the Midwest. It was a share purchase. Let me explain it the way I wish someone had explained it to me at 22. When you buy a company at the top, you don't buy the desks and the trucks and the people one by one. You buy the whole tree by buying the root. Everything underneath keeps running exactly as it was. Same building, same badge at the door, same boss handing out schedules. As far as the floor is concerned, nothing changed at all. And one of the businesses hanging off the bottom of that tree, 4 ownership layers down, was Brandt Tool and Fastener in Harlow. My father's plant. I knew it when I signed. I want to be honest about that. I did not stay silent to set a trap. I stayed silent because I had stopped explaining my life to people who had already decided what it was. They had their story. I had a business to run. The fact that their story and my business now shared a building was, for 3 years, just a private piece of irony I carried, folded up small, right next to a yellow legal pad. The summer before the party, I went home for my aunt's anniversary, and my mother pulled me into the kitchen by the elbow with a smile aimed at the other room. The smile was for them. The grip was for me. When people ask, she said, low and pleasant, we don't tell them what you do, Ingrid, it gets complicated. Just say you're in logistics and leave it there. I could have told her right then. I could have said the words that would have ended 12 years of this in one breath. I didn't. Sure, Mom. Logistics, and I went back out to the deck and let her run her evening the way she liked to run everything. I told myself that was mercy, that I was sparing her the discomfort. That was the lie I told myself for years. Here is what I had wrong, and it took a banquet hall and 80 witnesses to teach me. Silence and strength are not the same thing. Silence is just a closed door. Sometimes a closed door protects you. And sometimes it lets a person stand on the other side of it and rewrite who you are to a room full of strangers, while you politely say nothing and pass the potato salad. The retirement dinner was not a small thing. My mother had been planning it for 2 months. The Harlow banquet hall, the nice one with the chandeliers that town saves for weddings. Close to 80 people on the list. 40 years is a long time, and the plant turned out for it. Floor guys, line leads, the front office. My mother's church friends too, the ones whose opinion she had organized her whole life around. There was a banner, Roy Vale, 40 years of service. A slideshow on a loop. A microphone set up for the toast she had scripted. She had built the evening into a monument to a respectable family headed by a company man, with one daughter the accountant and the other daughter. Well, we don't tell people what she does. I checked in at a hotel off the highway. I hung the good coat. I sat on the edge of the bed for a while, and I thought about the one detail no one in that banquet hall knew. The plant's general manager would be there. His name was Carl Deaton. I had sat across a conference table from Carl Deaton every quarter for 3 years. I knew exactly what he looked like. And the moment he saw my face, the careful story my family had built was going to meet the one man in the room who could read the org chart. I almost didn't go. 12 years of being the family's cautionary tale will do that to you, but something told me to put on the good coat. My mother found me before I was 3 steps inside. Oh, good. You came, in the voice that means the opposite. Try not to bring up the trucking thing tonight. These are your father's people. Then she steered me toward one of her church friends. You remember our other daughter? Ingrid, our other daughter, not the accountant, the other one. The friends smiled the smile people smile at a story they've already been told. And I smiled back because I had eaten this exact meal 100 times and knew how to chew it. My sister Paige found me next at the drinks table. Half a hug. Eyes going straight to my handbag and then away. You could have at least chipped in for the catering, she said, not looking at me, looking at the room. Some of us actually carry this family. I said the catering looked lovely. She heard it as a dodge. What I understood about Paige, without anyone telling me, was that she and her husband were underwater. A kitchen remodel they couldn't afford. A pattern of loans from mom and dad that everyone pretended were gifts. Paige needed the family hierarchy exactly where it was, with her at the top and me at the bottom, because that arrangement came with benefits she was already counting on. An inheritance she had already spent in her head. Just don't make tonight about you, she said, lowering her voice as our mother walked past. I told her I had no intention of making the night about me. It was the truest thing I said all evening. I didn't have to. My mother was about to do that herself. Across the hall, my father was holding court with his old crew. This was Roy Vale in his element, warm, certain, 40 years of belonging lit up on one face. I let myself stand at the edge of it and watch. One of the younger floor guys asked him about his kids. You got daughters, right, Roy? My father's face did the thing it does. Paige is an accountant, real good with numbers. Married 2 kids, then the pause, the small adjustment, and Ingrid's, she's in trucking, I think. We don't see her much. The man had worked inside a building I owned for 3 years. He did not know what his own daughter did for a living, not because he was cruel. Because he had never once been curious enough to find out. The family had a slot for me, and a filled slot does not get questioned. The only kindness in that circle came from a man named Glenn, my father's oldest friend at the plant, 60, silver-haired, who had slipped me a butterscotch candy at Christmas when I was 8 and never once treated me like the family's footnote. He broke off from the group and came over. Ingrid Vale, asterisk, he said, warm, Tell me what you're really up to these days and don't say trucking. I told Glenn the short version that I ran a company. That it had grown more than I ever expected. He nodded like a man who had always suspected as much and was glad to be right. Knew you had it in you, he said. You were the only one of those kids who ever actually worked. Before I could answer, my mother's voice cut across the room. All right, find your seats. We're doing the toasts before the chicken gets cold. She had a schedule. Of course she had a schedule. She moved through the hall like a stage manager. She positioned Paige beside the microphone. Paige is going to say a few words on behalf of the children. On behalf of the children. There were 2 children. One of them was standing right there, uninvited to speak at her own father's retirement. I wasn't surprised. I wasn't hurt the way I would have been at 22. I found my seat near the back, the family table's outer orbit, and I sat with my water glass and watched my mother conduct her evening. And that is when the side door opened. A broad man in a gray suit came in, shaking the cold off his coat. Carl Deaton, my father's boss, my general manager. I watched it happen in real time, the small frown of recognition out of context. The mental gears trying to fit the owner of his company into a retirement party in Harlow. He started to lift a hand, the way you greet someone whose conference room you sit in 4 times a year. And I gave him the smallest shake of my head. Not now, not yet. He caught it. He was sharp enough to catch it and decent enough to honor it. His hand dropped. He turned toward the bar instead. I want you to notice what I did there because it matters for everything that came after. I was not ambushed. I saw the collision coming from across the room, and I chose to let it arrive on its own schedule. I just did not yet know my mother was about to set the schedule herself. I slipped out to the quiet hallway by the coat check to collect myself. The chandelier light went soft out there, and the noise of the party dropped to a murmur behind the doors. I stood there with my water glass, and I thought about the yellow legal pad in my bag, the one folded into quarters for 12 years. I carry it because of what I wrote on the back of it the morning after my father slid it back to me. Not a plan, not a list. Just one sentence I wrote to myself in the parking lot of a truck stop when I was 22, and I needed something to stand on. You do not need their permission to become what you are going to become. I folded it up and put it back. I pushed through the hall doors and walked back into the party. My mother had reached the toast portion of the evening, the part she had scripted and rehearsed and built the whole night toward. She was already at the microphone, radiant, doing the version of herself she saved for rooms like this. She talked about my father, 40 years, early mornings, the good man who held a family together. She talked about Paige, the accountant, the grandchildren, the anniversary trip to Savannah they were planning. She talked about the company, what it meant to this community, what it had meant to have a man like Roy Vale on the floor. And then she looked out at the room, at the church friends and the floor guys and the line leads and Dale Conroy standing by the bar, and she said the thing. The only sad part, she said, pleasant, practiced, is that our younger daughter never quite found her way. You know how it is. Some children just, they don't quite land anywhere. But we are so proud of Paige. 80 people heard it. The room did not go quiet immediately, but it shifted, the way a room shifts when something has been said that cannot be unsaid. My father looked at his plate. Paige lifted her chin. And Carl Deaton, who had been holding a glass of water and honoring a quiet shake of my head for 2 hours, slowly set his glass down. He walked to the microphone, politely, calmly, with the specific, unhurried authority of a man who runs a plant and is not in the habit of saying things he doesn't mean. Forgive me, he said. Roy, this is a wonderful evening and I don't mean to interrupt the program, but I can't let that go without saying something. He turned to the room. I work for Ingrid, quiet. More specifically, Ingrid Vale owns the company that owns the group that owns the plant where Roy has worked for 40 years. I sit across a table from her 4 times a year. She runs her reviews clean, she knows her numbers cold, and she has built something that a lot of people in rooms like this would not know how to build. I just thought someone in this room should say that out loud. He stepped back from the microphone. He did not look at my mother, he looked at me. And he gave me a small nod, the kind you give a person when you have finally said the thing that needed saying. The room was not loud after that. It was the specific quiet of 80 people recalibrating at the same time. My mother stood beside the microphone. The smile was still on her face, but it had nowhere to go. My father looked up from his plate. And for the first time in a long time, maybe the first time since I was 22, and laid a yellow legal pad in front of him, he looked at me as though he were actually seeing me. Not the slot. Not the verdict, me. I did not stand up, I did not speak. I picked up my water glass, and I held it like a woman who had been holding things quietly for a very long time and knew how to do it without spilling a drop. 3 days later, my father called me, not a text, not through my mother, a direct call to my cell on a Tuesday afternoon. He didn't explain how he got the number. He said he had made some calls. He said he had talked to Glenn. He said he had looked some things up. And his voice when he finally said it was not what I had expected. It was not grandiose, it was not rehearsed. He just said, "I owe you an apology. I don't think I have the right words for it yet, but I wanted you to know I understand now what I didn't understand then." I told him I appreciated the call. And then I said the thing I had been carrying almost as long as the legal pad. "You didn't have to believe in it, Dad. I just needed you not to write across it." He was quiet for a long time. "I know," he said, "I know that now. I have thought about that night a lot since then, about what it cost, about what it taught me, the restraint I was so proud of for 12 years. It protected me, but it also let the wrong story run too long unchallenged in rooms I wasn't in. Silence is not neutral, it just hands someone else the pen. I am not telling you the loud ones are right. I am telling you there is a difference between the kind of quiet that comes from strength and the kind that comes from giving up on being understood." I found mine eventually, in a banquet hall in Harlow, in a gray suit and an unhurried voice at a microphone, in a phone call on a Tuesday afternoon. And somewhere in my wallet, still folded into quarters after 12 years, "You do not need their permission to become what you are going to become." I never did. But it was something, finally, to have the room know it too.